I'd like to call this meeting to order this Tuesday, February 19th. The clerk will please take the roll.
Mayor Wolcott.
Here.
Vice Mayor Biendo.
Here.
Councilmember Williams.
Here.
Councilmember Villanueva.
Here.
Councilmember Alton.
Here.
Councilmember Hall.
Here.
Councilmember Woodard is running late, Mayor.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is a little bit of an unusual situation in that we are this evening, our first order of business is actually not a hearing on the discussion of water and water resources, but in fact to interview the replacement for our presiding judge. And we have a number of members of the Surprise City Academy. Good to see you here again. But we will be adjourning now into our session to discuss actually to do the interviews for the presiding judge and for that replacement. And then we will be back after that time period to actually hold the discussion about our water resources. So if there was confusion about the order of the agenda, which was published, my apologies, but we do need to make certain that we are taking care of our judges. They are here. We don't want to keep them waiting through a long discussion about the water hearing first. So I appreciate your indulgence, and with that, I will simply begin the meeting as we normally do, and ask you to please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, liberty and justice for all. And so we will then, I will entertain a motion to recess into an executive session.
So moved.
Motion has been made and seconded to recess this meeting to executive session. And Phone's on so I can be heard. We'll call this meeting back to order. And we have one item of business this evening. This is a presentation and discussion regarding the City of Surprise water resources. Who is presenting? Terry, are you presenting on this evening? All right, welcome.
Drive the presentation here, but Christine's going to do most of the talking.
Can you pull that closer to you?
Again.
Perfect.
Madam Mayor, members of council, tonight we hope to provide you with what hopes to be first in a series of presentations that we hope to spur some discussion over the very broad topic of water resources. I'm going to drive the presentation here, but Christine is our water resources manager, and she has a much broader and well as in-depth understanding of the topic. So, Christine?
Madam Mayor, members of the council, I'm going to briefly describe our water resources. Some of the questions that have come up on this topic have been, what is our supply and demand? What is our plan? What is the future of water in Arizona? I know that's a big question based on a lot of the news that's been out there and information that's been passed around. Water rate increase concerns, our assured water supply and strategy with that, and then our capacity for growth. Can we grow based on the water resources that we have? Now, our existing supply is, we have allocation of Central Arizona Project water of 10,249.
I'm sorry, would you also mind putting your microphone closer?
Okay.
Just pull the microphone. Yeah, there you go.
Our CAP, or Central Arizona Project allocation, is 10,249 acre feet. And then we have approximately 3,584 acre feet in reclaimed water that we recharge every year. With some of our new infrastructure, we'll be able to recharge a little bit more with the recharge wells.
If you wouldn't mind, for those who don't know what that means, I think it would be good to explain what acre feet per year means. What does that really mean? How does that relate to the population that we currently serve?
There's different numbers out there, but 1 acre foot is approximately 4 homes. Can provide water for 4 homes. 1 acre foot per year can provide that for 4 homes, and just depending on the size of the homes, water usage, etc., that can vary.
But Christina, there's no groundwater?
We do have groundwater. The caveat with groundwater is for every acre foot that we take out, we have to replenish that groundwater by law. So it's going to take away from our CAP or from our effluent. So it's kind of a wash in that respect. We have a bucket of water, 16,000 plus acre feet of water for us per year, but you have to replenish it. So it doesn't really, even though you can use groundwater, you can't use groundwater, if that makes any sense. Like currently, there's a misperception that we use groundwater, and molecule for molecule, we use groundwater. But as far as our bank and our calculations, we're using stored water that's stored in the West Salt River Valley aquifer.
But Christina, when we're talking about supply in this slide, we're talking about the city's water operations. We're not talking about EPCOR,
right,
and all the rest of the water companies that serve Surprise.
Exactly. It's only the city's water service area. That's the only thing that we have control as a water provider over.
Right.
EPCOR is private. We can't control them in any respect regarding water.
And we supply how many households?
Approximately.
Good question.
I have to think about it. With wastewater,
12,000?
we're 15,000.
Yeah,
15,000?
that's correct.
Yeah, right around 15,000 for water.
Okay. So about 30% of the households.
Currently.
So for today, for the purposes of today, what you're going to give us is an overview of what we control as a city.
Yes.
And what I want to try to help all of our council members become is a little bit more of an expert about water.
Right.
But this is just one piece of the picture, because Surprise is a growth city. And obviously EPCOR serves part of our city, a large part of our city. And we have Ma and Pa water companies in the northern part of our city and our planning area that could be available to serve growth, the growth areas of our city. So what we really want overall is for a big picture of what our water plan looks like, not just what the city of Surprise controls, but what our providers control and what future providers may be able to control, and how much, what the capacity might look like. Because I think we're trying to look at this overall as the master plan for planning the future of Surprise. So I know for the purposes of this evening, what we're going to be talking about is the city of Surprise. But as you said, Terry, this is going to be one of many conversations, and we want to try to get a bigger picture. But using the supply for the city of Surprise that we control right now is a great place to start.
Right. And even though currently we're the smaller provider between us and EPCOR, going forward in our growth area, we're looking at being 80% of the water provider instead of the minority. You know, as our growth goes to SPA 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6, we're the majority of the water. You know, we're going to be the highest water provider. And there's, in the Integrated Water Master Plan, we made assumptions that we would also purchase some of those mom and pops as we move into those areas and encroach around them.
Right. And that's something that's something that we need to understand more about, how we go about accumulating those, the control of those particular companies. So if you could, I'm going to ask the council to just bear with us, let you get through your presentation, and then we'll start asking questions and move forward. So
Okay.
Thank you.
And Christine, if I might add, Mayor, if I could add one thing, we are, since we're going to be the largest provider in the area, as we go, so go to the others. And so what we put together here is our future plan, whatever that may be. Others are going to have to do something similar with their planning. So it would behoove us to sort of outline our plan and be at the forefront there and let others follow as it relates to water provider within the city of Surprise.
Thank you.
Now, the future water supply in the Integrated Water Master Plan, these numbers are in there. CAP, currently we still have the 10,249, but reclaimed water, there's an assumption that that's going to grow based on the population growth and some recovery of the water used through the wastewater. And that comes out to 84,267 acre feet per year, but that's based on a population of 700,000, which is what's assumed to be our build out in the Integrated Water Master Plan. And then the other providers of CAP, that's at 3,392 acre feet, if we can acquire that at some point from Brook and Circle City Water. But will it be available, and can we acquire it at that point? To put it in perspective, our supply and demand for 2012, this is what we did with our CAP water. We recharged 5230 acre feet. Reclaimed water, we recharged 5343. So even though we had that other number identified as our historic number in our assured water supply, this is what we actually did with those new wells, and we'll probably be able to do more with those new wells that we have. And then our demand was 7853. So like I was talking about to Councilmember Hall, that's the amount that we have to, we stored the 10,000 plus, but we had to take that 7,800 out of that, and so then we had a small amount banked for the year. Our plan in the Integrated Water Master Plan, these are a whole list of things that we identified in that plan that we would do near term, midterm, and long term. And as far as the time frames, they're still very accurate in what we planned on doing, because as far as water resources goes, the availability doesn't change a whole lot. Our current status with some of those activities in the Integrated Water Master Plan in this last year, and in the past we installed Vado Zone recharge wells, so we have a total of 20 Vado Zone recharge wells. We're recharging 50% of our CAP allocation. In the Integrated Water Master Plan, the plan was to recharge 100%, but due to finances and priorities in the city, we recharge what we need plus a little. And then the future focus areas is doing some groundwater modeling and seeing where we're pulling water from and where we're putting water back in, so that there's water still available for the future. What I call it is the underground water cycle, making sure you have that water available when you need it. To recharge 100% of our CAP allocation and then acquire more CAP. Currently there is some available out there, but it's we need to work on acquiring that. Our water future, and I'm going to say this 5-letter word, rates. We really need to look at water rates and do deliberate paced increases. We haven't had an increase since 2010, and that was adopted in 2008. So we're in the 3rd year of that, so we're really going to have to look at that, and I wanted to bring it up because I know those conversations are coming, especially if we want to acquire new allocations and start storing that. That all has a cost associated with it. We're going to continue to look at our water expenses, and then we got to look at current versus future prices. And in this next slide, I'll show you some of the prices that are out there. The purple line, that's the current cost to recharge a CAP credit. It's about $130 an acre foot. This coming year, I think it's going up to $136. Average increase has been between 3% and 8%, just depending on the year. And I added that other little bump in there. That's the 20% assumption based on the Navajo Generating Station and the new electrical costs that are going to affect the CAP cost. Now, once we run out of our allocation, that cost up high, that's the cost that we'll have to pay CAGRD to replenish for us, and that's like 3 to 4 times the amount that we're paying currently. So that's where that value of acquiring water rights benefits us. Okay, next one. Our assured water supply, basically it's the planning, and what we need to look at is storing water, acquiring rights, modeling. And you know, you've heard the term wet water, and I've been asked, what does that mean? And that means where we have water, where we're pulling it out, where we're putting it back in. In some cases, like with our CAP, we recharge it a little bit north and east of our water service area, and the groundwater flows naturally south-southeast. So it's not coming directly to us in the ground. And then, of course, there's barriers, et cetera, down below. And so we need to look at where that water is, where we're pulling from, and where we should be putting it back in, and if we should just build surface water supplies, basically, you know, pipes and stuff to bring it from places and treat it and serve it that way. And then capital improvements. There's going to be some capital improvements required for either storing it just upstream of where we're pulling from, or, again, the surface. And then, you know, the thing that we really need to look at is save today for use tomorrow. We got to build our water coffers so that we have that water pot available when we need it, you know, for whatever we need it for, economic development, you know, new development of homes, etc. And that's basically just kind of a shotgun approach to water resources. I know that we do plan on coming back and tackling specific topics that would have specific questions. I do have a white paper that I authored for your information that we'll be sending out for you to review, and then we'll go from there on what topics and future discussion topics you would like to look at from that paper.
Councilman Williams.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Christine. I hope your son won tonight so you could go see him in the semifinals. Your son's in the state basketball playoff game right now, so yeah.
It was 2.40 seconds left, and they were down by 4. So I don't know yet where it's at. But.
Half court shot. 2 of them. So the assured water supply, so this might be a future discussion. When you look at that, when a builder comes in, there has to be 100 years guaranteed water supply. How is that? I guess my questions are, I still don't understand this, is who calculates it? How is that measured? And how do we make that assurance in terms of issuing, who issues the permit? How does all of that work? How does that process work? How do we know there's 100 years of water there?
We don't. There is some modeling that has been done by Department of Water Resources, but they look at the pot kind of as a whole pot, and it may not in reality be that way. And again, molecule for molecule. The Assured Water Supply rules, ADWR, Arizona Department of Water Resources, issues those. It's either a certificate or a designated provider. And the certificates are what the private water providers acquire. And it's typically a certificate for a particular development. And they do an analysis, they submit it to the Department of Water Resources, and then Department of Water Resources analyzes that analysis and says, yes or no, you have enough water. And sometimes they'll say you have some water to build so many homes, and then you got to acquire more water. We're a designated provider, so we do that same thing, but we do it for our entire current and planned service area. So when we submitted ours, I did all the calculations and said, okay, this well is going to pull X many acre feet for the next 100 years, that well, and we had to do it by year, by well, by location, and supplying it for particular developments. And then Arizona Department of Water Resources goes through it, and they pared it down, pulled it back a little bit, and I asked for so much. They said, well, we can give you this much, because we did it with 10 other providers. So they had to throw us all in the pot and munch the numbers, and everybody got something, but not everything they wanted. We will have to go back in 2019 for our designation. We'll have to do modeling at that point, because we won't be with the other providers. DWR did the water modeling in the last one, but this one we'll have to do it ourselves, and hopefully we can prove there's a little more groundwater available, and then we'll have a little more recharge available at that time to increase our designation of assured water supply.
So I guess that's, and I appreciate that information. I guess that's where my concern comes into play. It doesn't, and understanding the process that we go through in this, and I appreciate the presentation and all the information that you've provided. Just seems like there's, and I know P&Z works on this, and we're working through this in terms of how our planning process and future development all unfolds and how we're going to utilize water. But I just don't, I can't put my arms around, yeah, there's 100 years of water there. I just don't, I don't want to sound, I don't get it. And so, I mean, there's got to be a better approach in terms, if we can't calculate that, then let's get rid of that. Let's do away with that. And I'm sure that's not something that this entity can decide, but certainly we live in a desert. We know that this to me, this is one of the most, and I know Councilmember Hall has been really focused on this issue. This is the one of the single most significant issues that my grandkids and my great-grandkids are going to face. This is going to be a traumatic issue in the next 50 years. Not just for Arizona, I think, and for a lot of states, certainly in the Southwest region. What I'd like to see is some sort of citizens committee, or do we create a water commission that can work with this plan that our water department is working on, and to just further investigate and provide council with information in terms of looking at some of these issues.
Councilmember Williams, that's exactly what I was planning on doing. I do intend to appoint a subcommittee on water. And what I want to do is to create a subcommittee that includes, as we have with our other subcommittees, that includes members of council, members of staff, and also some members of the community that have expressed a strong interest in it. And so I'm looking for putting that process together. And I think that once that subcommittee has some time to kind of walk through this presentation and walk through some of the other input that you have provided to us with that white paper, we might be able to start just expanding on the conversation and having a better understanding. I share Councilmember Williams' concern about what does having a 100-year water supply really mean? And where's the accountability? And actually, where's the liability? If we say we have a 100-year water supply and we don't, who's liable for that? That's a concern.
Well, I guess, Madam Mayor, Councilmember Williams, I will address the first thing you brought up in a minute, but the designation of assured water supply, we have to reapply every 10 years and prove up and prove up and prove up. So it's not like a 100-year free for all, you know what I mean? It's you have to go back and prove it every 10 years. So there is some accountability in that respect, but I think your questions are very valid, and they're being asked across the state, not only by citizens, but by water experts. Where is the accountability? What are we doing? Is the wet water going where it needs to go? Are we storing it where we need it? You know, there's a lot of those questions out there. But one of the things I would recommend is, with a committee, the Arizona Water, it's an organization that I've been a member of for over 20 years. They are working on creating an expert panel of, or an expert pool of resources that people can use for these panels. I would recommend that we have a few experts in specific areas. One that deals with hydrology, one person that knows the water law, because it's very complex.
Yeah.
And I think that's probably where I have a strength is I know the water law, I know a little bit of hydrology, I know kind of a little bit of everything, but you need somebody that's an engineer that can talk to some of the capital improvements and some of those needs. So there are a specific type of experts that this panel will require to be able to educate the other people that are on that panel when you have that question of, well, what does this mean? Because the water resources laws, just like water quality laws, are like a tree. You know, you start up one and, well, what if? Then you end up this branch, down that branch, this way, that way, that way. And before you know it, you're like, how did we end up here? And it's just the way the laws are. They're very complex. They interact in different ways. Surface water, groundwater, CAP, renewable, non-renewable. There's all these things out there. And they all have different aspects to them. We're a junior priority right on the Colorado River, and we're a lower basin state. The upper basins haven't been taking their allocation for the last several years, and we've been getting that allocation and using it. Well, what happens when they do? There's that question
Exactly.
out there. So
Right.
there's all those questions, but I think you need people that are experts in some of those things and that have a pulse on what's going on specifically with the Colorado River law, or how that's affecting Tucson, or how that's affecting Mexico, or, how it's going to affect our little bucket right here.
Right.
And I will be looking for your guidance to help me pick those people that we need to put on that panel, because I think that's really important to make sure that the panel is useful not just to the council, but also to our staff and also to the citizens who've really expressed a strong interest. So thank you for that suggestion. Councilmember Hall.
Thank you, Mayor. Thanks, Christina, and thanks, Terry. Christina serves on the Westmark Water and Energy Committee with me, and she's one of the most knowledgeable people in the room. And it is a complex subject, and I really respect everything you know, Christine.
Thank you.
And I think this panel, if we put it together, I think it'd really be very beneficial to the city and to all of us to get educated on water, because, like Councilman Williams said, it's our kids and grandkids down the road that it's going to be a bigger and bigger issue.
There's some tough decisions to be made.
I just had now, I made a note of this Arizona Water Organization, but in your opinion, who is the best water attorney? Grady Gamage?
There's a variety of them out there. I would say one of the best ones is the director of AMWA.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Kathy Ferris, because there's only a handful of them. They're literally dying out. There's only a handful of them that were here when the Groundwater Management Act was adopted. So there's just not very many people that know down to the core where some of these things came from and why they are the way that they are. But there's a few of them out there that I know that I would recommend. I don't know that I would name names at this point, but if we do come up with that, there are people that I would recommend we contact.
Now, I mentioned to you that SRP was in one of our meetings and talked about this plan they had for the East Valley, and that they have a real detailed water plan based on a real detailed study. And so in that meeting, I said, geez, don't we have anything in the West Valley? No, you guys don't have anything.
No, we're
And
working
so
on it.
are we working on it as the West Valley to this? There's an organization called WestCap, right?
Exactly, and I was actually just telling Terry this morning, West Caps has been notified that they qualify to do a feasibility study. We have to do an assessment and submit to be on that feasibility, or to get that feasibility done by Bureau of Reclamation. And what we're applying to do, plus a few other things, but one of the main things is to calibrate the Hassayampa and the West Salt River Valley model, so
Okay.
that we do know some of that information of where this water and how it's moving between, around the white tanks both ways.
Right, right.
So we are moving a little bit on that. We haven't quite gotten to where we have the next plan, but we've been focusing on modeling.
Okay.
That's one of the main
Okay.
things that we need to do before we go beyond
See,
that.
that could be something that we could discuss and quantify in our this commission meeting, whatever we call it,
Right.
If I'm going to be on it, I don't know.
One of my recommendations, and we'll probably, if I can convince my management, is special planning area too. I would recommend modeling that area so that, that's our prime area for growth. So, are we going to have the water available? And if we find out we don't have too much, can we start putting it where we need it?
Right.
So that'll be
Right.
one area that I am recommending that we model and find out for our
Okay.
own needs.
Then this could be another time for another subject in another meeting or whatever, but we need to really define a lot of things like wet credits and dry credits,
We have rights identified as one of the
okay?
topics.
And where we stand in that, and how that all works. There was one thing on the plan, if you could go back to slide 5, I had a question. Slide 5.
I don't have
What's that chart?
Where you talk about your plan? There you go. Okay, what is EXC OCS? What was that?
I'm looking.
Where did I see that? Maybe it was only on my iPad I saw it. Maybe I'm dreaming. I thought I saw it here.
EXC?
Yeah, it said EXCCOS, but whatever.
Oh, it might have been just the, like the Excel
Oh,
at the
okay.
bottom, kind of a file
Yeah,
name or
okay,
something.
all right. That's, what do you mean by the perfection process?
That means fully utilizing all our CAP allocation and ensuring that it's completely utilized from now forward, either through recharge or use, direct
Okay.
use.
Okay. Okay, and then in the study, you talked about acquiring pledges for extinguished groundwater rights?
Right. The majority of those are in the Special Planning Area 1, where there were historical agricultural areas. And most of them we've already acquired, and we went out and looked at. Are there any that we didn't acquire? But Marley Park, I think, as they build their next section, will acquire a little bit more. So we have a pocket of groundwater that's there,
Okay.
of credits that have been extinguished, and they're a one-time use. We have about 45,000 acre feet there in
Okay.
that groundwater bucket.
Well, when I was on Planning and Zoning Commission with Councilman Alton, during that time period, there were tons of developments that came in to Planning and Zoning. And all of them had this letter that said, we have 100-year assured water. And I was thinking, how are they, like all that land north of Sun Valley Parkway is all in the hands of developers, and they all got 100 years assured water. And it just seems to me that something's funny there. I'm with Councilman Williams. That just doesn't quite.
Well, Councilmember Hall, members of the council, it's very complex. They basically hand their bag to Central Arizona Project or Central Arizona Groundwater Replenishment District, and the citizens pay those higher replenishment costs on their taxes. So it is way different than what we do. You know, we deal with all of those payments and that water replenishment, et cetera, versus using the regional replenishment district.
So those developments north of Sun Valley Parkway, it's on their property tax bill?
Uh-huh.
Oh, really?
If you look at go into our My Surprise, type in that address, and you will see, if you go into the taxes, you can bring it up, and it'll show Central Arizona Groundwater Replenishment District amount.
Ah, okay. Well, I'm learning all kinds of things, Christina. You're just a wealth of knowledge. Okay, that's really all I got. I mean, I think this is a good first start, and then we can just start drilling down on certain issues, and right? And so that we're all smarter about this, you know. I mean, we're not going to be as smart as you ever, but
It's
as
taken
long
me a
as
while, and I'm
as long
still
as we're
green.
aware of what's going on, and we as a council, because the buck stops here, you know. I mean, just like the mayor said, who's accountable for all this 100-year water? Where's the liability lie? You know, we're approving all these projects, and all of a sudden, if they run out of water, what's what, right? So anyway.
Yes.
Thanks,
Thank you,
Christina.
Thank you, Council Member. And so I do appreciate your helping us get the ball rolling on this discussion. This is really, I think it's important for the entire city, for our future, and I look forward to working with you to try to put this panel together, and I'm sure we can have that conversation offline. At this time, then, and thank you, Terry, for helping putting this together. At this time, there are several people in the audience that I know have come here specifically to talk about water, and that's one of the reasons why I wanted to have this meeting this evening, is to actually give them a chance to just express some of their concerns about water, and for our staff to hear what their concerns are as well. So at this time, thank you both for being here, and I'm going to call forward the folks that have signed up to speak this evening, and Sherry, they are who?
The first person is Kenneth Hewitt.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Christina. Thanks, Terry.
Mr.
Thanks.
Hewitt,
I'm Ken Hewitt.
go to the main
Can I
podium.
sit down? Can I answer your water supply question first without talking against my time?
Actually, what I would like if you would just kind of give us kind of an overview of what your concerns are. We're not going to be able to get into depth conversation tonight. That's going to be part of that water panel discussion. So tonight, I really would like you to just focus on your concerns, your main concerns.
Well, I have a couple of main concerns, one of which is the fact that specifically this area where we live, particularly north of Greenway, we have very good well water. We are in no danger of running out. The southern part of the valley does not. The classic example of that is Russell Ranch. Russell Ranch is at the corner see the red thing in there? That's where it is. It's about 12 miles from the other red thing. The other red thing is a well that they drilled to meet their 100-year water supply requirement for Russell Ranch. And they drilled it in Bell Ranch, right next to the 303 freeway. Because they had a 100-year water supply certificate for their development, but that's based on hydrology, based on experience, and it's a relatively complicated process. But when you go to drill the well, you may find the water is no good, which is what they found. And that's typical down there because of the high use of pesticides and fertilizers, and the fact that if you think about it, this whole aquifer is an underwater river, and all the garbage is ending up down in the bottom end of this place down near Interstate 10. So therefore, you have a much higher degree of pollution for nitrogen, and that's defined in the EPCOR's or Arizona America's first pleadings to get their rate case changed. Was the reason that they had to bring that water in from the CAP system was the fact that the water down there was bad, and they talk about the fact. And it's also very unproductive in the sense that once you take a lot of water out of the ground, out of the aquifer, you tend to get the particles in there to get closer together. That causes subsidence. But what it also does is it reduces the flow rate. So you'll see in the documents I've given you, you'll see that there are pumps in the area south of Greenway where they put very large They have very large diameter wells, but they have like 75 horsepower pumps in it, 125 horsepower. The average pump in the area north of the Greenway produces a little over 1,000 gallons a minute. The average one south of there produces about 500 and some. The problem is going to be that as they will always have to drill. They have to drill 9 more wells because you have to have enough well capacity to meet your requirements. You cannot rely on cap water because there is a distinct possibility that you will lose cap water for any number of reasons. They lost cap water in the east end of this valley because subsidence caused the canal to collapse. And so they had no cap water, right? So DWD says you have to have redundancy so that if you lose any single source, you still have enough. So they will have to build 9 additional wells. They're not going to be very productive. So what they have done in the past and what they'll do in the future is they'll take water from the aquifer that's under the city of Surprise, and they'll pipe it down south. So therefore, they will deplete our water, the water that's under our area, which is bad. Okay. The second thing is that the utilization of cap water to make into drinking water is not a very productive idea. And the reason it's not a very productive idea is you have to process the water before you can use it. They did that in Tucson. They replaced their groundwater system with cap water. Created huge problems due to chemistry and issues of that nature, but it weren't. But what they finally found out what they could do was by injecting the cap water into the ground. The cap water in the ground mixes with the water that's already there. Now it turns out that the contaminants in the 2 waters are different, so that by the time you get done, you've reduced the arsenic level and you've reduced the nitrogen level in the groundwater, and you've gotten rid of some of the particulate problems that's in the cap water. So then they're able to pull out water. So that you put in.
Mr. Hewitt, I'm going to give you an extra minute because I know that's hard, but believe me, I got 2 minutes out of the legislature yesterday, so I know what it's like to be under a time limit.
If you put in an acre foot of cap water into the ground, you are able to get out more water, and you process it. It's easier to process, and then it's available all year round. You will always have the cap system shutting down because they have to clean the canals at least once a year. So I think that if I had my others, I would buy all the water company above the city limits of Surprise. I would start injecting your cap water in the northern boundary of the city of Surprise, so that it'll rebuild the aquifer down there, and then when you withdraw it, you end up with a better quality water. And the other thing I'd do is I'd require all of the parks and the golf courses to use recycled water.
Thank you so very much for your testimony, and I'm sure you'll be at the table and part of the conversations in the future.
And I'd like to thank you for having them send in pizza and beer for us while we were waiting.
We have Ken Wright.
Welcome, Mr. Wright. I'm going to ask Sherry if you would set the clock at 5 minutes, since Mr. Hewitt got 5 minutes.
Thank you. I'm going to talk more or less tonight from high up in the sky instead of right down on the ground. Some overview. About a month ago, I submitted a request to the Assured Water Supply for a study or a copy of their study that assured a 100-year water supply. I've been through 3 people on that. The first contact person referred it to a public information officer. That person called after a couple of weeks and referred me to the head person down there. I talked to that person about a week ago. They assured me that I'd have an answer, and I still don't have an answer. I'm afraid that I know what the answer is. I won't project that tonight. On what is our plan, I would like to know what these increments are. What's the definition of near term, what's mid-term, and what's long-term in terms of time-wise. Going out to the long-term situation, We had that study that came out in December of last year from the Department of Interior, and that's the one I mentioned here before, where any comments that people had, they need to be turned in by the middle of March. And so I don't know what's been done here on that. But I'm very interested in this participate in regional water supply development discussions. That study that came out in December talks about, the term they use is stakeholders getting together to review the study, because the study itself did not make any recommendations. It was simply an informational type thing. I believe the term was, it's a call for action. And again, I contacted the person that is involved in the overall study, and she indicated about 2 weeks ago that it was probably a couple of months out that stakeholders would be called together. But above all of this stuff about Surprise and other jurisdictions is the supply of water. The water situation is a dynamic situation. And so any entity is going to have a hard time really pinning things down, because it's based on projections. And Yogi Berra, that wise sage, he told us that already years ago, that it's tough to predict the future. And, so we understand that. But I would hope that some attention is given to this, and especially in the long-term situation, because there's going to be competition for the water. And Surprise, if it chooses to isolate itself, is not going anywhere in the competition. There needs to be some regional involvement. If cities need to get together out here in the West Valley, for example, and hire someone, and each city partially fund that position, this is a very important issue. And I think something like that may be in order. It would be a lot cheaper than a city trying to have their own person, or try to have somebody on staff that could have appropriate information to represent the city in any kind of discussion. So I agree with this committee idea. I have several questions about the plan that was presented tonight, but I'll present those in writing. There's some things here I think need to be pursued, and I don't want to consume any more time. I will say that study that came out in 2012 was just like the mayor's excellent speech. It talked about the past, what had happened in terms of geological formations in the water supply. It talked about the present, and then, of course, it said, we need to get planning on the future. And that's no different than what Surprise needs to be done, past, present, and future. And so, anyway, I hope some action is taken on this. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much. Was there anyone else that wished to speak this evening?
That's all we have, Mayor.
Okay, thank you very much. And both of you gentlemen, I really do appreciate your strong interest in this issue, and we look forward to continuing the discussion. I know that a lot of people have expressed an interest, and again, we all want to become a little bit more water experts. We may not be water buffaloes, but we need to be water experts. So I thank you very much for your input. And seeing no further business, I will entertain a motion. Motion has been made and seconded to adjourn this meeting, and this meeting is adjourned.
The Surprise Dial-A-Ride service provider is Valley Metro, who'll operate through Discount Cab.